AI is going to take our jobs. We hear that everywhere these days, right? But what about AI taking over our creative jobs? That's what we're diving into today with this really interesting article from Chaos Management. Have you heard of it?
Chaos management.
Yeah,
Sounds like they're ready to just dive right into the unknown.
totally. I love it. And the article itself is called Artificial Intelligence and Human Creativity. Human Intelligence and Artificial Creativity.
Okay.
And it's by Mirko Compagno,
Okay.
who is an Italian extended reality designer and developer, and he also teaches about AI and creativity.
Wow. So he's got like a foot in both worlds there.
Yeah, it seems like it. Okay, so the article really jumps into this whole idea of AI as a creative partner, not a replacement,
Uh-huh.
which I think is a really interesting way to frame it. Compagno seems to be pretty optimistic that AI can actually help us be more creative, not less.
Hmm.
It's kind of like having a brainstorming buddy, but this buddy has access to like all the information ever.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's so important to emphasize, because I think a lot of times when we talk about AI and creativity, there's this fear that it's going to replace us.
Right.
But what Campagno is suggesting is that it can actually make us better at what we do
Yes.
by pushing us to think outside of our usual boxes.
Yeah, and he even uses the term divergent thinking to describe this ability of AI to like make connections that we might not even think of.
Yeah, and that makes sense if you think about it, right? Like AI doesn't have the same biases that we do. It doesn't have the same preconceived notions. So it can look at things from a completely fresh perspective.
Totally, and he actually gives this great example. He talks about like combining panda and rose to create a panda rose,
Okay.
which sounds kind of silly,
Yeah,
but it's that idea of like breaking out of our typical thought patterns
totally.
and coming up with genuinely new ideas because of this AI. And what I thought was really cool is he connects this to reality,
Yeah.
or XR.
Excellent.
He's saying that AI can help us not just have these like initial sparks of inspiration, but actually make stuff in XR. He talks about designing a lamp in XR, which just sounds so cool to me. I don't even know if I can quite wrap my head around it.
It is it's a mind-bending concept in a lot of ways. But like if you think about it, XR is all about creating these immersive experiences.
Right.
And AI can actually help us do that in a much more sophisticated way than we ever could before.
Yeah. Have you ever, I mean, I know this is a little off topic, but have you ever used any of these like VR headsets or anything?
I have, yeah, I've dabbled a little bit.
It's pretty wild.
It is. Yeah, it's a very different way of experiencing the world.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think that's what Compagno is getting at, is it's not just about seeing it in 3D.
Right.
It's about actually experiencing what you're creating even before it exists.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And he talks about how AI can help us generate different design options, simulate materials, even get feedback from potential users, all within that virtual environment.
Oh, wow.
So it really democratizes the design process in a lot of ways.
That's so interesting, because I was actually going to say, I feel like this could make design so much more inclusive,
Absolutely.
because it's not just about who has access to the technology to create.
Right.
It's about like whose ideas are being heard.
Exactly, yeah. You can have people from all over the world contributing to the same project, sharing their perspectives,
Oh, that's amazing.
which is incredible, yeah.
Okay, but before we get like too carried away
Yeah.
with all of this, because it does sound really cool, we have to talk about the potential downsides.
Yeah.
Because I know Compagno, he doesn't shy away from those either.
Right, and I think that's what makes this article so valuable.
Yeah.
Because he's not just giving us the rosy picture. He is acknowledging that there are some real concerns here.
Yeah, so what are some of the things that he brings up?
Well, one of the biggest concerns is obviously the potential for like an overabundance of AI-generated content. Like, what happens when anybody can create a catchy song or write a poem with just a click of a button?
Right.
What does that mean for human creativity?
Yeah, are we just going to be like drowning in a sea of generic AI-produced content?
That's the worry.
Huh.
And I think it's a valid one, because if we're constantly being bombarded with AI-produced art, music, writing, whatever it might be, will we even be able to recognize what makes human creativity unique?
And then on the flip side of that, what if we become too reliant on AI to generate ideas for us?
Right.
Like what happens to our own creative muscles?
Yeah. It's like any other skill. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's a really important point that he makes is you need to find that balance. It's not about rejecting AI altogether.
Right.
It's about using it responsibly, using it ethically.
So how do we do that? How do we find that balance? How do we make sure that AI is enhancing our creativity and not stifling it?
Well, one thing Campagno suggests is that we really need to focus on education
Okay.
and not just teaching people how to use AI tools,
Mhm.
which is important,
Right.
but also about really cultivating those critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
How do you look at something and decide whether it's valuable AI-generated content or just, noise?
Right. It's like being a savvy consumer.
Exactly.
You wouldn't buy something
Right.
without reading the reviews or
It's
whatever.
everything.
You
Yeah.
need to have that same kind of critical eye.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we're still developing as a society
Right.
because this technology is so new.
Yeah.
But he also talks about establishing like actual ethical guidelines
Okay.
for AI and creativity. So, how do we make sure that it's being used responsibly? How do we prevent it from being used to spread misinformation or manipulate people?
Oh, that's huge. Yeah. Because it's one thing if you're a lamp in XR,
Right.
but the potential is obviously there for much bigger things. And I think that's what's really interesting too is, Campagno isn't just some like theorist. He's out there. He said he's developing these XR experiences.
Yeah, and not just like any experiences. Like
Yeah.
he's worked on projects ranging from healthcare to cultural heritage.
Right.
So, thinking about how AI and XR could be used to preserve like ancient ruins
Oh, wow.
or bring historical artifacts to life.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a far cry from just like churning out generic content.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It really shows the breadth of what's possible here.
It really drives home that point that AI is a tool.
Exactly.
And it can be used for good or for evil, I guess. And all comes down to like, what's the intention behind it?
And speaking of intention, he also teaches about this stuff.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he does.
So he's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk, right?
Totally.
He's out there actually engaging with these issues from both a practical and a theoretical standpoint,
Yeah.
which I think gives him such a valuable perspective on all of this.
Totally. Yeah. It's one thing to read about it in a book. It's another thing to actually be like the one making it happen.
Yeah.
And that hands-on experience.
Yeah.
It has to inform how he thinks about these things.
Totally. And it makes you think, like, if we could use AI to design a lamp, which is a physical object, right?
Yeah.
What else could we create? What about, like, systems?
Systems. What do you mean by that?
Well, we were talking about how Campagno talks about AI being used to, like, get feedback from users to make designs more inclusive.
Right.
What if we applied that same concept to, like, education systems?
Okay.
Imagine if we could use AI to get real-time feedback from students and teachers
Wow.
to constantly be improving the learning experience.
That's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. Or even like healthcare systems.
Exactly.
Like you could design more efficient, more patient-centered care models.
The possibilities are kind of endless when you start thinking about it that way.
Totally. Okay, but let's step back for a second. We've talked a lot about like the potential benefits, but what about the potential downsides? You mentioned this whole thing about like this AI generated content flooding the market. Can you talk more about that? What are the concerns there?
Yeah, so one concern is that as AI-generated content becomes more and more prevalent, it could lead to kind of a homogenization of culture.
Okay.
If algorithms are determining what we read, what we watch, what we listen to based on our past preferences, we could end up kind of trapped in these echo chambers, right?
Right.
Where we're just constantly being fed more of the same.
So instead of like expanding our horizons, it's actually narrowing our perspectives.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not even just about the content itself, it's about the creative process.
Yeah.
Like, if we become too reliant on AI to generate ideas for us,
Yeah.
lose that ability to think critically and creatively on our own.
Yeah, it's like use it or lose it.
Exactly.
Oh.
That's why it's so important to find that balance
Yeah.
between leveraging this amazing power that we have,
Yeah.
but also not losing sight of what makes us human.
So it's not about like being afraid of AI or like rejecting it outright.
No, not at all.
It's just about being aware of the potential pitfall.
Being aware, being thoughtful, being critical.
Yeah.
And I think demanding transparency as well.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Like, we need to know how these algorithms are being designed. How are they being trained?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
What are the biases that are being baked into them?
Yeah, because like you were saying, it's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
Exactly.
It's up to us to decide how we want to use it.
And that's why I think conversations like this are so important.
Yes.
We need to be having these discussions. about the ethics of it all, the impact on creativity, on culture, on society as a whole.
Hmm.
We can't just blindly embrace these technologies without thinking about the
I
consequences.
can't just be like, ooh, shiny new toy.
Exactly.
Right. We have to be thoughtful about it.
We do. We have to be
Uh,
really proactive
yeah.
about shaping the kind of future that we want to see.
So where do we go from here? Like, what are the concrete things that people can do to make sure that AI is used to enhance creativity, not to diminish it? So where does this leave us? We've talked about AI's incredible potential for boosting creativity, but also those potential downsides. What's the takeaway for our listeners, especially those who might not be as deep into the AI world as, say, Mirko Campagno?
That's the question, isn't it? And for me, it's why this article really hit home. It's more than just tech talk. It's a call to action.
Okay, I like that.
Campagno's basically saying, hey, this AI thing is here, it's powerful, but it's not like some destiny we have no control over. We actually get to decide how this unfolds.
We're not just along for the ride.
Exactly. And not in some far-off future. Right. Look at how AI is already in music production, advertising, even journalism. It's easy to get caught up in the novelty of it all. Wow, AI can write a song, how cool. But then we need those deeper questions, like you were saying. What are we losing in the process?
Right, because it's not all doom and gloom either.
Absolutely not. Campagno points out some really inspiring ways AI can make creativity accessible to more people, give them tools they never had before. Imagine, like, a student in a remote village with the same creative software as someone in a major city.
Now that's a future I'm into. But that takes effort, right? It's not automatic just because the tech exists.
100%. It takes awareness, education, and honestly, a good dose of healthy skepticism. We can't just accept things at face value. Who's building these AI tools? What biases are built in? What happens in the long run because of them? We've got to ask those tough questions.
Like, we wouldn't buy a new phone without checking reviews.
Yeah, exactly. Same critical thinking needs to be applied to AI, and not just each of us individually, but as a whole society. This has to be talked about everywhere, schools, workplaces, even in government. This is bigger than just cool gadgets.
This deep dive has been seriously thought-provoking, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, there's always more to explore.
But if our listeners take away just one thing, it's that the future of AI and creativity, it's not set in stone. It's up to all of us to shape what it becomes.
Couldn't agree more. And with that, thank you so much for having me on this journey. It's been a pleasure diving deep into this with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to everyone listening, keep those creative sparks alive, stay curious, and don't be afraid to ask those tough questions.